educators. Today, the way the forum is set up, we have panelists here to have a question that actually was sent out beforehand. We'll address that question and answer it. And then we'll have a second group of panelists that will come up after this group is complete. Again, the panelists have all seen the time schedule as a block of time that each has an opportunity to explain the question or address a question or address some national issue or a state level issue, such as Doug Ute. I know everyone's seen Ohio High School in the news the last couple of days. Positive news. Again, so you have opportunity here. But to get started, really, I want to get first pass off the mic to our president, Tanda Maceo, to let him kind of kickstart everything, and then we'll get started right into the program. I know if we get to a point where Glenn Faircloth is not here, I'll just skip over Glenn and go to Director Russell, and then come back to Glenn Faircloth later. He's driving in right now. He's just running behind.
Thank you, Ty, and welcome to all of you. Let me start with some thank yous because I think it's important to recognize the work of Dr. Renee Willis and Dr. Tyrone Overson as our co-chairs for what we call our Superintendent Commission. This is their second run at this, and it gets better and better every year. And we're so proud of the work that they're doing to bring you in the room together to have what we call the big conversation, right? Talk about issues that really impact our children in the classroom across the entire state of Ohio. That's what we're going to do today, and we're going to have close to 300 attendees online join in. So this is being live streamed online for our 298, I'm going to round it to 300 participants that are in attendance at this weekend's event. I also want to take time to thank our corporate sponsors. You'll hear more from them after this event. We'll proceed immediately after this into what we're calling the superintendent reception. We got some finger foods set up for you. We got some wine and beer. If you like something beyond that, I might be able to take you down the corridor and cut into a room on the side, okay? But anyway, to be very brief, I want to thank all of you superintendents. I want to thank ODE and Ohio Board of Education and all the other participants that will be joining the 3 panel discussions that we're going to have this evening. Let me tell you that OABSE is here and sponsoring this event tonight because it is our responsibility to be on the front end of this conversation, right? Not to be in the background, but be on the front end of driving the issues forward with the people like you in the room who are making those kind of policy decisions every day. So we're excited to be here today. We're excited to have you tonight. Now, I want to turn it back over to Tyrone so we can get started.
Thank you. Before I get started, definitely introduce my co-chair, Dr. Renee Willis. I know she has a few words.
Thank you, Todd. Good evening or afternoon. Welcome. And I just wanted to, before we turn it over, to really have the in-depth discussion. For those that aren't that in-depth with NAPS or OABSE, which is an arm of NAPSE, the organization was actually started by superintendents. So even though we have grown now that we've got the boots on the ground, we're doing all kind of programmatic efforts, it was started by superintendents. And the mission was, how do we collectively affect the education of our students? So as you can see, everyone in here may not be a Black educator, but they definitely impact and affect the lives of Black students and all students, but particularly our mission with students of African descent. So I welcome you all, and as superintendents, this is where the rubber meets the road, truly. And so we thank you for dropping your tools today and coming down here to be with us and to be with us tomorrow. But we've been going all day. Sessions have been wonderful all day. So thank you for these words, and let's get the real work.
Thank you, Dr. Willis. Again, as she said, there are over 300 attendees virtually at this conference right now. There are over 40 presenters at this conference right now. And I want to quickly run through the sponsors, just so everyone knows who the sponsors are that are sponsoring us. We have 1888 Ohio Comp, RFS Behavioral Health Services, Step by Step Learning, Dream Builders University, Future Ed Solutions, Thrive Scholars, Seven Mindset, Brickler and Eckler, Attorneys at Law, Munitrix, the University of Toledo, Franklin Covey, Millennium Community Schools, And again, earlier I said Future Ed Solutions. So those are the sponsors. And now I'm going to jump right into the program. And we have our first panelist to address the question. It will be Mr. Jennings from Youngstown City Schools. And the question was that I sent out. It says, define equity as you see it. What ideas and strategies are you incorporating to expand equity in your district? Mr. Jennings.
Thank you. First of all, I think to to answer the question, I think everybody will share the sentiment. We have to define what equity is, because 2 years ago, equity was something totally different than what it is now. So there's a political definition of equity, and then there's the actual definition of equity. And when I say that, and I know with having a room of superintendents, we all know that we've been infiltrated by the false definition of the critical race theory. And that has caused something different to happen in our schools. We're challenged in every area. I know that I'm in a group, and we have a chat on Fridays. A group of superintendents. We have a chat on Fridays, and it seems like every week, every day, there's another superintendent who's getting fired because they're doing the equity work. As a matter of fact, there's a young lady who was fired maybe 2 weeks ago in Mississippi, in which she was hired to do the equity work, and she started doing the work, and she offended some people, and she got fired in about 3 months. In about 3 months. So really defining the definition of what equity is something that's huge. But the strategies that we're using in our district, and then we're incorporating what we did, and I will have to give the credit to our scholars, our students at Youngstown, because they actually came up with a resolution for us, and we created these committees out of the resolution. So we have about 5 different committees on our equity committee. Our first committee is HR and policy. So everything we do around HR and policy is studied by this committee. One of the things that came out, just to give you a small example, one of the things that came out, I don't know about other people, but our payroll sucks sometimes. And you got to know that the one thing that can mess the morale up for any school system or any system, period, if people are waiting to get paid and they're waiting to get their check, one of two things happen. They want it, and they want it right. So our policy used to be that if your check was messed up, you had to wait 2 weeks in order to get your check. Well, when we started looking at what of our policies, and we started looking at equity, we was like, this can't work before. So for a person like, a superintendent who's making, $100,000 or more, that's not they can miss a check. That's not a problem. But for a crossing guard or somebody who works in a lunchroom, that 2 weeks could be eviction. It could be them not eating, them not getting medication. So that's something we definitely had to look at. The next policy is everything around curriculum. Once again, under attack. If you're following the news, last week, Florida got rid of textbook because of critical race theory. And I don't know how math became part of the critical race theory. So that's interesting. And then we have a community group. When we first started the group, our equity committees, we didn't really want the community involved, because we figured we had to get our stuff ready first. We had to get our things in order before we could get other people involved. But slowly we started to add different community members, but we are limited to our community members because we don't want those politics to come in to our equity work. The other piece is peace officers. And what we mean by that is, really, we know that the impetus of a lot of the work that we're doing now is stemmed from the George Floyd incident. So we wanted our police officers and our firemen and everybody like that involved in our committees too, and they meet with our scholars as well. And the last, and probably one of the other things that's really important that came out of COVID, is health and wellness. So we know that there's an equity gap in health and wellness. But I think the most important part to all of our work is every single one of our committees, we at least have 10 students on every single committee, because that student voice is so important. So when we talk about a Youngstown, and I tell you, as a superintendent, just where I've been, and even as a principal, the worst time of the year for me is when it got warm outside, because that's when the violence starts, and that's when those other things start. So we really want to have our students involved and have their voice a part of our equity, so we can figure out how to help them. So I'm going to stop there. If I have more time, I can come back.
Pass the mic to Dr. Phil Wagner from Licking Heights Local Schools.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. Give you a little bit about the district. So we're a very fast-growing school district, 16 miles east of Columbus. When I started there 11 years ago as superintendent, we had 3,300 students, and now we're just almost 5,000, and we've become much more diverse along the way too. We have parts of Franklin County, parts of Licking County in the school district. So one of the things we've been doing is trying to embrace and celebrate our changes and diversity, and that's gone fairly well. When we look at our efforts, we really have clustered around 5 areas. And I have to say that in a large part of this is my job working with the Board of Education is to make sure that we have annual goals that meet the needs of our student body. And you talked about student voice, and I think that's so important. We look a lot at teacher voice and student voice as well as community voice. And our Board of Education has been very supportive. And in fact, I have our first ever diversity, equity, inclusion supervisor, Mr. Corey Stroud here, and the Board of Education very much supported that. So he's actually opened our eyes even more this year. But he's been leading a lot of the work this year, but for years we've been focused. And we really focus in about 5 areas. So we have our supervisor who helps us, and I want to underscore that we labeled the position a supervisor because I wanted Corey to have administrative authority over everything. Sometimes you have officers in places, but I wanted him to have full authority. So he goes in same level as any other district administrator, central office administrator. So he's been tremendous to help us. We've done a lot of work with courageous conversations. We have worked with the ESC of Central Ohio. A lot of Glenn Singleton's work we've been familiar with for years, so Corey's been certainly helping us with that. One of the areas we've focused on, we continue, is on our student affinity groups, again, talking about student voice and how important that is. So we make sure we have a lot of celebration, recognizing students where they are. Community partnerships are important. I think that, being Caucasian, there's only so much I can do, and Corey has certainly helped us, diversify our office more, and it's been more welcoming. And I know that we have a partnership. There's actually an NAACP chapter in Licking County, and I think you're going to be vice president of that, right? So certainly some relationships there and some changes. But we also have, in our school district, about 28% of our student body identifies as African American. And I don't have the actual demographics. There's no way to do it. But we expect about at least half of that group is first generation international families. So Somalians, Ethiopians, and we actually formed a partnership with an Ethiopian support group, and they actually are coming in and providing tutoring services now, and they actually serve all the students, but they've done a tremendous job and extended their work with Chris. We've done a lot with Ohio State as well, too. A lot of what we do is with data analysis, too, and I was talking to Scott Hunt, who's here from the Ohio Department of Education, and last year we were recognized for some of the work and gap closing that we had done with some of our students, including students of color. And we've done a great job in that area. And really, it's just focusing our efforts and making sure that we are more equitable, and that we have opportunities. And then last, I would say that we really just focus a lot on community engagement. Being that we have 2 counties, there's a lot of differences. But I think that as we have celebrated the diversity, we certainly have more opportunities for people to feel and to be welcomed and to engage. So we've done a lot with the community engagement. Some of that engagement actually comes from the students. I have a superintendent student advisory council, and I know that I love talking to the kids. I mean, every time I walk in there, on my reference sometimes I'm dealing with discipline, so you kind of get used to the naughty kids, and you start thinking, okay, this becomes your reference. But I meet with that superintendent student advisory council, and I'm like, I know there's tremendous hope for the future and what our students are going to do for us, because I know they're going to be caring for us at different levels sometime, right? So, but they bring a voice with that too, and they help us with the community group as well too. So I'll stop there in the interest of time too and recognize Dr. Sanders.
Dr. Sanders.
Yes. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm always honored to be at these sessions. I look forward to learning from my colleagues, and I appreciate the contributions that all of you make. I did bring a handout. Renee always told me when I come to a meeting, make sure I bring a handout. So Ty, I need you to pass this out if you don't mind. So the way I approached the conversation for my part today is to sort of address equity from a macro organizational point of view. And I think what my colleagues have described are really centers on the details around the ingredients that is required to have a fully inclusive, comprehensive kind of organization where every student, every employee, everyone feels empowered. So the approach that I took, and I'm sharing with you from an article I wrote about a month ago, that focused on these 5 essential leadership skills in a post-pandemic culture. I have defined, we believe that the pandemic has been a game changer in a lot of ways in terms of how schools function and manage and how we do our work. And understanding where we're headed, it's important that leaders have a good organizational understanding of the dynamics at play that will allow you to not only do work of inclusion and engagement, but comprehensive work across the table, which focuses primarily on student achievement. And so I strongly agree with celebration, inclusion. We've been celebrating a bit this year in our district. Our high school got a 94% graduation rate, which is our highest rate in probably some decades. And I wish I could take full credit, but we have some amazing people that are just doing tremendous work. And the culture defines the level of engagement that speaks to the areas that both Phil and our Youngstown superintendent referenced earlier. So very quickly, this small piece identifies these 5 skills, and I'll go over them very quickly. And if we have time, we can have a conversation about them. I think it's important that leaders understand that the educational marketplace, not only has it changed for some decades now, but it's really changed in a dramatic way in a post-pandemic context, meaning that the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that there really are other ways to educate children than in the way that we have wanted them to do for many, many decades. And what that tells me from a leadership point of view is that effective leaders, superintendents, or others have to have a really full understanding of the dynamics at play of what the marketplace really means. And one of the challenges I've had the last few years has been offering digital instruction and having an internal debate with my team about the real quality of that instruction and what it really means in terms of the end product. So Sandusky is probably the only district that's experienced this issue, but we have students who go to school for 3 years, maybe 3.5 years. They need 21 credits to graduate. They're at credit number 14. It's January, and between January and June, when they get to the digital program, they end up with 21 credits. And they walk across the stage on Sunday afternoon at the football stadium with the other 200 kids in the class. And so the question really begs, what experiences that they have in those 4 or 5 months that they weren't able to get in the previous 3.5 years? And what is the framework by which that happens? The business side of me said, if the student comes into the office and says, I'm going to go to a charter school, I'm going to go to a digital school, I don't want to lose the student and I don't want to lose the money. And so from a customer service point of view, the customer is telling us that he wants another product, and the product that they want may not be at the same level of quality. So do we stick to a certain level of quality and suffer on the fiscal and other areas that has a significant impact on our ability to implement the things that we're talking about here? So the first conversation for my part of the discussion, the panel tonight, is leaders understanding the changing educational marketplace and us having to make decisions that sometimes are contrary to our core values about what we think education ought to be. A second focuses on the role of higher education that I think has gotten a bit of a pass for some time about being able to address effective teaching dynamics and the changing marketplace, and the addressing students who come from diverse backgrounds. A third has to do with transformational leadership. A fourth has to do with feeling comfortable in a discomforting situation. And if the pandemic did nothing else, it taught us that there are some really hard feelings that are closely tied to political ideology at a rate that I had never seen. And I've been in the business now for a spell. I don't think that's going away in the very near future. And so leaders' ability to address that, and we can talk about that tonight if we have time. And then finally, the fifth leadership quality deals with technology, what I call personality management, which has to do with our ability to manage the policymakers around us to get the outcome that we're looking for. And the natural tug and pull that takes place between a superintendent and their school board of how do we get decisions out of them in a way that helps the end result of what we want to do. And politics, of course, has taken a role in this last 24, 36 months that most of us have never seen. So I hope we have an opportunity to have a conversation about some of these contextual, macro level issues from an organizational point of view, impacting both inclusion, equity, and any other measured outcome that we're trying to find. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders. Now, Director Russell, please.
Um, good evening, everyone. Taquana Russell, Millennium Community School here. Equity, one of the things that we did as an organization was when we recognized that our students were coming back, that they spent enough time away from school, that they had a challenge with their social skills. And so one of the things we put in place was a behavioral health department inside of our school. We have three community-based agencies that perform behavioral health services, not just for the students, but they also service the entire family. And so that was one of the things that we felt like we needed to address right away with our students coming post-COVID. Having those partners has been, I would say, a godsend, because our teachers aren't necessarily equipped to deal with some of the things our students bring. And so the ideal of having professionals that deal with these kinds of things inside of the school on a daily basis, carved out space for them and everything. And, they were looking for a clientele base consistently, and we were looking for some professionals to consistently be in our school. And so that was one of the ways that we decided that we were going to meet the needs of our students. The second thing was the idea behind poverty. One of the things that we made a change in our school curriculum was that every student receives career education, because we felt like we shouldn't be waiting until students get to high school to start having a conversation about what kind of life they want to live. And so coming post-COVID, we were dealing with our students bringing these ideas of, man, I'm hungry, man, I don't have the same clothes I used to have. How about I can't wear my clothes anymore because I'm larger than I was before COVID even hit. And so the ideal of responding to our students and saying, okay, we're going to teach you how to address that by giving you some additional education in the form of career exploration or career information. And then I think my last thing that I would talk about addressing equity with our students was we recognize that, as Dr. Sanders said, about students wanting to work remotely and parents being able to respond to the customers that way. And so we had never let our students take their Chromebooks home before. And I would be the first one to tell you, I would think about that again. But I would think about it with a different approach, okay? So my approach that we're going to address is that we want to continue to allow our students to take the technology home. We like to believe, someone once told me, a stolen library book is probably a read library book, right? So if the students are taking their Chromebooks home, they'll be more engaged, more likely to engage with the technology and follow through. But the piece that I learned and that I would like to address for the upcoming school year, it may be costly, but it's something that's going to try, is 2 Chromebooks per student. And what I mean by that is there has to be a set left in the classroom. And, meeting the needs of a student has being able to recognize that, okay, I don't have my Chromebook today because my car got broken into. My mom's car got broken into. I don't have my Chromebook today because I left it, kind of thing. And that's really frustrating to the staff. So maybe it's an equity piece for the staff to have 2 Chromebooks per student with a classroom set. So anybody who can do something about that, let me know. That's how we address. All right, thank y'all.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. Fairclough, he should be coming in shortly. Mr. Todd, can you see if he's at the door right there? Dr. Fairclough is coming in from the Toledo area. He's not there. Okay, well, when he comes in, I'll put him with the next panel. But again, I do want to say thank you all, this panel here, for the words of wisdom, sharing of knowledge, and things to think about as well. Gene, thank you for, Dr. Sanders, thank you again for giving us a handout. The panelists don't have it, but it's a nice piece of information for those that have it now. We all have it. Dr. Wagner was talking about his school district and the changes. I guess happily, I happened to have a chance to work for Dr. Wagner years ago. At that time, we only had 1,300 students in the district. At that time, 20% of the student population was Somali. Is now, the 20% now is?
African-American population is 28%.
The total? And we had 20% Somali at that time. So, I mean, things have really changed in that district. 4th fastest growing school district in the state, I believe?
I believe that's right.
Okay. Director Russell, he talked a lot about how you're using your parents and tools that you're going to think about for next year and provide more equitable access for your students. Come on up, Dr. Fairclough. Provide more equitable access for your students. Again, the books and the computers and things like that, man, sent home. As we talked, many of us have talked, this pandemic has really opened our eyes on how we educate kids and how we think about educating kids. A lot of things we said we would never do, we did. Many of those same practices we're going to keep in place now because they're working for us, so how's it going there? Mr. Jennings in Youngstown, thank you for sharing the whole notion about what you guys are doing with your students there around the HR policy, the curriculum, the health and wellness, and the peace officers. Again, I had the opportunity to work in Youngstown as well. And I remember what the peace officers were doing when I was there. We had to have the attorneys come in and help us with the peace officers just to help with the kids. So I remember those days. But one of the things you brought up though was really, I thought was really something to take away for this audience here is that POC for the superintendents, professional learning community, where you guys are meeting once a week or every other, some kind of time frame when you guys are meeting. I tell you, that's one of the biggest takeaways I take away from something like this. It has to be a place and a time. You're talking about equity for everyone else. Equity and incorporating and expanding equity for the superintendents is really important. I think you guys, whoever is meeting that group, if you can get other people in that group, it will really help the superintendents. Because again, we all know being on the superintendent's island is a lonely island by yourself. So I want to say thank you there. Dr. Fairclough, how's it going? But thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And we know you had to take a lot of time away. He actually changed the schedule for us guys to come down here. I know that. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to come here. And the reason why he's brought in Dr. Fairclough is the only African American at a career tech center as a superintendent. So I want to make sure, got that lens of a not only K-12 education, but also career tech from that standpoint. So Dr. Fairclough.
Good. Like what Tyrone was saying, it's interesting coming from a career technical area. I've been working there in career tech and education for about 15 years. We started a bunch of things in Dayton Public and moved there. But as it relates to equity, especially among the African American community, we were sold, it goes back to the old W.E. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington debate. We were sold that, college, and it's deeply embedded in there. But that was just one piece of it. So now what we're finding out, especially in career technical education, that some of these areas where the multimillionaires are built are deficient. If you look in Columbus, as fast as Columbus is growing, those guys and girls that are on those towers or those companies own, they're all making money. They're making millions and millions of dollars. But in African American community, we hurt from that. And some of the things that we have been discussing is on this equity piece is how do we get them the information to understand how this works? And then how do we begin to not dismantle this concept of college, but we're saying college is okay, but also this is another avenue. And this is how you can begin to really end generational poverty. As we all know, most of us that went to college, you come out of there these days probably with $100,000 worth of student loans. And that piece is never going to go away. It's one of the biggest debates now in the White House. Do we get rid of the student loan issue or not? So what I'm finding out, what I'm struggling with in terms of having these educational conversation about career technical education and the equity piece that is involved is I'm trying to erase 50, 60 years of information that they already had and they believe in, and as concrete, families wrap around that. So we have a deficiency in African American and our Latino Americans into these different programs. In fact, they so depleted that now it's part of, in career tech, is part of our report card, so to speak. What minority groups are you tapping in? What's the equity piece, or how are you making it equitable so that they have access to information and to these particular areas? And it's very, very difficult. And I'm saying this as an African American male. When I speak to those communities, it's college, college, college. My kid is not dumb, so he or she doesn't need it, when it's quite the opposite. The amount of intelligence and aptitude that it takes to be a welder is incredible. It's not just about, okay, we got some fire and we're lighting a torch to this and this or that. You have to be able to troubleshoot. And most of us that went to comprehensive schools, and to include college, we got the information, we had to regurgitate that information, we wrote a paper, thesis, took a test, and that was it. Well, these young people have to be able to think immediately. When a problem goes awry, they have to be able to troubleshoot and build off of the information that they already have, which in our world we call it scaffolding, right? So they have to be able to take this. There's no tool that they can do this with. They have to be able to read, understand, construct, and then build. There's no other type of information or pedagogical way that we didn't all probably experience that requires that outside maybe a science class. So it's very difficult. So I'm struggling with that a little bit, to get that information out, to begin to, for them to understand how can we do this and with parents. So that's a strong equity piece that I'm still struggling with. So I don't have those answers yet, but we're working on it. We're really working on it.
One of the things that, as we, we kind of transitioning here in a second, but I have Dr. Renee Willis kind of give us a little wrap up of the first session, and while she's doing that, we can bring the second group of panelists up. That'll be Mrs. Habiba Grimes, Dr. Melvin Brown, Dr. Reba Cosby. Also,
All right, thank you. As they transition, the one thing I want to do is, again, make sure that we understand our mission and what we're here to do. We are here to do the deep thinking. We are the superintendents. We are the ones that can make it happen. So as I recap, I want to do a charge or a call to action of sort with superintendents. We heard Mr. Justin Jennings, Youngstown, talk about equity, but he also talked about the times when there's been some terminations around trying to provide equitable curriculum. We heard Dr. Wagner talk about his wonderful work, and particularly his student affinity groups, as we work to have an inclusive and equitable school district. We heard Dr. Sanders talk about equity on all levels, but particularly the macro level, in understanding the changing educational marketplace. We heard our community school partner, Mr. Tawana Russell from Millennium, talk about addressing poverty in Chromebooks and behavioral health centers. And then our superintendent of our JVC talk about the equitableness in
we've done a lot of work with problem-based learning. And when we talk about opportunities, those are the types of opportunities our kids lost when they went home. They weren't able to learn concepts in class and then apply them in real life context. Now that we're back in school, we're back to doing that same work, but they're bringing all these other issues to the table that we didn't anticipate. We knew coming back from our COVID shutdown that kids were going to bring something with them. We didn't know what that something was going to be. And now we're adjusting to it. So they brought a lot of anger. They brought a lot of frustration, regulation, self-regulation they've struggled with, conflict resolution, they've struggled with. And so those are tenets that we have to be able to attack and deal with in order for kids to be successful academically. When I think about learning loss, when we first shut down, one of my biggest concerns was what we did with our elementary, particularly our primary age students. Developmentally, there are certain things you're going to get as you grow older. And I was worried about what does a 5-year-old who hasn't seen school in 2 years now look like as a 7-year-old? What is a second grader who has had no real school the way we know it for 2 years look like as a 4th grader? Those are things I was really concerned about. As far as the curriculum, the standards, I couldn't care less. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that. And that's okay. Those are things, again, we can re-engineer to make them more successful for our kids. It's all about their experience and the opportunities they have within classrooms to be successful in ways that they want to be successful. We talked earlier about career pathways. It's crucial. We have to give kids multiple opportunities to be successful, whatever success means. One of our mistakes has always been, we determine what is success for kids. How do we allow kids to determine what their own success is going to be, giving them a voice in that process? We've been very fortunate to have an academy structure in our that is based on career and interests. Our kids have been in pathways for years in Reynoldsburg. What we're trying to do now is push that further down into upper elementary school and middle school, so they start to see what some of those opportunities are now as they get older. So by the time they come to 10th grade, when they say, oh, I want to go into the medical field, well, that doesn't just mean being a doctor or a nurse. Our kids know that. They know there are multifaceted jobs and opportunities that the medical field offers to them. They know what that means. I know when I was in high school, if I was going into the medical field, I'm like, I'm not smart enough to be a doctor, but maybe I could be a technician, or maybe I could work in the HR department, or maybe I can work in the marketing department. These are all things that are associated with hospitals that our kids don't know. So those are things we really, really want to focus on when we're talking about what equity looks like, what learning loss, quote unquote, looks like, and how we attack it. I feel as though learning loss is a device that's been used to put schools against each other and measure us and stack us and compare us, so that we know funding comes with testing. We know how that looks. And we know in communities of color, many of those funds that are being drawn away from those communities to go to private schools, that's not by mistake. That's intentional. Because there are forces in our legislature, and yes, I'm going to talk about Ohio. I'm real brave because I'm leaving now. You know that, right? I'll call out our legislator. We know that there are people in the State House who have a mission to erode the impact of public education. And they're funneling those dollars away from public schools to go to private entities so they can privatize the entire thing. And lots of people are making money on our kids. So what our voice looks like and how we talk about what we do on a daily basis, how we talk to our state legislatures to make sure we check them and make sure they know we're watching, that's what we have to do as a collective group. That's what organizations like this have to allow us to do. I can get in front of someone and have that conversation all day long, and they're going to say, well, you're just looking out for your interests in your district and your money. Maybe I am looking out for my district, absolutely, but I'm also looking out for every other student in the state of Ohio. So how do we go to the table as a group to make sure we have people understanding that you're not going to use terms like learning loss to rob dollars from our communities and thus rob our kids of opportunities? Those are the types of conversations we need to make sure we're having on a regular basis.
Thank you. Dr. Willis, wrap up.
Thank you. All right, panel 2. So their question was around learning loss, even though we will no longer say that word, but social emotional learning. Let's just say. So we thank you, CEO Habiba Grimes, and we thank you for your day treatments. But I want to thank you for the concept of regulated teachers in front of our students. Otherwise, they're evoking these stressed responses. I want to thank you, my soror and Superintendent Trotwood Madison, Dr. Crosby. Want to thank you for your mental health, restorative practices, and for the future farmers of America. All right. We want to thank you, of course, Dr. Brown, even though you're leaving us to go south, it's okay. But you've always done great work, even before Reynoldsburg, when you were up north, we remember that. So with this group of people, my challenge, my call to action for my fellow superintendents, are you an emotional, intelligent leader or an emotionally intelligent leader? Are you aware that our staff have compassion fatigue or even that they are unregulated? And what are we going to do about that? Our students have suffered, our teachers have suffered, our administrators have suffered, we have suffered. So my charge to you, what are you doing for you? Because if you're not regulated, if you're not centered, how do we lead the organizations? I want to thank you again, Habiba, for something you told me a couple of weeks ago at Leadership Cleveland. You said, I just wish people had grace during this period. And as I sat here and listened, I think everyone else wishes that people had grace during this period. How will we remember what grace is? I just sat here and I said, we're going to remember this by saying we're going to get regulated and centered to be effective. There's your grace. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Dr. Willis. Now we're going to switch. Our next group will come up now. Our next group of panelists will be Mr. Doug Yee from Ohio High School Athletic Association, Dr. Kim Miller-Smith from Ohio School Boards Association, Dr. Scott Hunt from Ohio Department of Education, Director of Field Relationships, Ms. Merle Johnson, Ohio Alliance of Black School Educators Superintendent Committee member, also a State Board of Education member, District 11. We have our State Board President here, Ms. Charlotte McGuire, coming up as well. She's also out of District 3. And the last panelist for this group will be Mr. Ron Todd, Minority Rep from Governor DeWine's office. Okay, thank you. Open up chairs. Okay, for this third group of panelists, again, this is really looking at things from a 30,000-foot view, much more holistic and global perspective. We think about education, but the question that was emailed to them, and they may change it around again. These are true decision makers and leaders up here, so they'll twist it and turn things. Ain't that right, Doug? It says the question was, what are some priorities that superintendents and school leaders should focus on? How can your organization support district school leaders? And we'll start with Mr. Doug Ute.
Okay, thanks, Ty. Appreciate that. I'm still like recovering. I just found out Melvin was leaving. And man, I was a superintendent in Newark when Melvin came to Reynoldsburg, and man, has he done a great job, and wish you well, Melvin. And so many of you I know in here, and I just appreciate, I'm really comfortable in this room tonight. I did 37 years in public education, and there's a teacher coach, AD coach, high school principal, and then a 20-year superintendent career, last 11 in Newark, Ohio, just east of here a little bit. So I worked with Phil and Melvin and some of the others around here. And well, I was kind of thinking, well, we're doing a lot of things at the Ohio High School Athletic Association. What will I bring up tonight? And certainly this is my wheelhouse. This is mental health in there. And I'll share with you that I was in a school district when I took the position, oddly enough, and you'll say, how did you not know this? When I took the position, I didn't know Newark had a graduation rate of 70% for about 20 years. I knew what the third grade reading scores were, all those kind of things. And I got in and I said, you're kidding me. And I'm very happy to say that when I left 11 years later, it was 90%. And like the good doctor from Sandusky stated, it wasn't me. It was a community, passion in the community. And Melvin, I'm not superintendent anymore, so I didn't care about our test scores because nobody in town did. They cared about our graduation rate. And so I was able to really focus with our staff on those type of things, what angst and things our kids were going through. And I can tell you, all these things that you talk about don't matter to kids if they're hungry, if their shoes have holes in them, if they don't have pants, if they've grown out of their clothes, if they don't have a haircut, all those type of things that I'm glad to see all of you are focusing on, because if you take care of those things, the test scores will rise. We all know that. And so 2 years ago, I began as the executive director of the Ohio High School Athletic Association during a pandemic, and not knowing whether we would play or not in the fall. And I'm going to give a lot of credit to, I always do, to Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Houston. I talked to Lieutenant Governor quite a bit, and who also obviously had the ear of the governor to keep kids playing. And my passion and comments to him was always about mental health of our kids during that pandemic. They need something to do after 2:30. They need to get out of their house. They need to be around their peers. They need to be around the good people at our schools. And so just so happy to hear everything everybody's doing to address those things. And so what are we doing at the Athletic Association to help with wellness, mental wellness of kids? And so I was on a job maybe 2 weeks and met with a group of professors from life sports at Ohio State University, which is part of their psychology and athletic department there. And so it's backing of Gene Smith, which is pretty huge. And we had a conversation about that we were going to write a grant from the Susan Crown Exchange to address mental health of our students through our coaches. And think about this, because I was eating lunch, and this is the way I always describe this. They said to me, we did a survey, and 65 to 70% of our coaches are lay coaches. They're not there. I took a bite of a hamburger, and I thought to myself, that's pretty high. Well, while I was chewing that burger, in one bite, I went through Newark City schools and all our coaches and found out, not Newark it wasn't. And then I talked to other superintendents and principals. A lot of our coaches aren't getting that training. And I'll continue to draw back on the Newark City schools. Our professional development became about the wellness of our staff and the wellness of our kids. Somebody had mentioned, I think Dr. Willis might have mentioned, you got to take care of yourself to take care of others. And so we had 500 teachers in our district that when I would go through buildings and say, hey, Doug, what am I supposed to do with? What am I supposed to do with? And I realized they need help addressing how to help kids and those type of things. And so the coaches, the 30 to 35% of our coaches that were teaching history or math were getting that type of professional development. But the gentleman who poured concrete all day, that coached 7th grade track, wasn't. And so our mission right now with Life Sports, and we're one of Washington, the other, that received a Susan Crown Exchange three-year grant to address this in our state. And so we have pilot schools. And so it's Mansfield, Akron, Wheelersburg, Dublin, Newark, Marion Elgin. We just brought Princeton in down to Southwest. And so I always talk to superintendents. We're coming to you. We're coming out to our schools. And their goal is to train 1 million coaches nationwide. Our goal is to train 15,000 coaches here in Ohio on mental wellness of kids. And I always think the good Lord just puts you in a position sometimes that just hits you upside the head of why. So I'll tell you, I know I don't look like it, but I'm a grandfather of 8. That's a joke, by the way. My hair would show that. My oldest granddaughter's in 7th grade and plays volleyball. And I remember sitting on a Saturday in Marion up in their middle school and watching middle school volleyball. And it was a tri-match, so you had teams playing, a lot of people around, beautiful day. And a young man came in and sat right down from me here, and before long, 2 Marion City police officers appeared in the door, and there were 3, and they looked in, and looking at him, thinking the game's over. Everybody goes outside. I see him talking to that guy who was sitting right down from me. Before long, there's 6 Marion City police officers there. And all the parents, all the kids, everybody's kind of just hanging outside in between games. And before long, they put that young man in cuffs and in a cruiser. I remember standing there and some little girl ran by me bawling. Somebody said, "That's her dad." I thought to myself, wow, I'm not criticizing police officers, but man. But I immediately thought, I wonder if her coach knows what just happened and how they're going to deal with it. Because as a former coach, I'm going to admit at 24, I would have said, how in the heck are we supposed to win? Blah, 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 blah. But it should be on that young lady. And so, that instant, I use that as an example because we all have those type of things happen to our kids. Do our coaches know how to respond to those type of things? And so that's what we're doing at the Athletic Association to address this. We have curriculum being written this year. We surveyed when we had about 6,000 coaches respond back to a survey. Our coaches are thirsty to help because we know graduation is impacted by life after 2:30. So have the engagement of our kids in something other than history class. And so to get kids involved in that and all our lay coaches out there, and I don't even want to limit it to lay coaches because our coaches that teach history need more mental health training. And so we're 100% behind this and shoot me an email if you say, hey, I want to know a little bit more about how our coaches can be involved in this, but we'll aggressively be going out next year with this group and addressing those issues. So,
Mr. Yusuf, so as I hear you say, then you'll be looking for more schools to sign up for the live sports?
yes, we call it Coach Beyond. We was trying to figure out a word to put in there because we know how one word can throw everything off the rail type of thing, but it's Coach Beyond. And a lot of our schools know about it. We'll be getting back out. Our problem is, our issue is, how do you train these people, particularly the ones that work all day? And so what we've learned through COVID is we can do it right through that. But and then because the days of asking Dr. Sanders at Sandusky, can you send all your coaches to Columbus for a training one day? And he's going to say, on a Tuesday, where am I going to get subs? All those other things that have impacted us. But all right, thank you.
Right. Those superintendents in here again, hopefully you guys are signing your students up or your coaches up with Coach Beyond next year. At this time, we have Dr. Kimberly Smith, our school board. I'm sorry.
Thank you for allowing me to be here with you this evening. I'll keep my comments short. Dr. Willis and many of you have brought up the things that I believe we need to concern ourselves with as we begin our year next year. The public schools are in jeopardy, I believe, and what we do at the Ohio School Boards Association, we do have lobbyists and a team that's working to try to pass favorable legislation for our students, but it's tough. I like hearing about your ideas of action calls. It's very important for us. The political vitriol that is it's abundant, I guess, and it abounds in our school districts. It's damaging to communities and it's hurting kids. And as a superintendent, I'm a former superintendent as well. I can't imagine trying to negotiate. Some superintendents are negotiating 2 people on this side and 3 people on this side, or we are censoring folks, or it's rough. It's really rough. Trying to find some middle ground for our leaders. We're not going to agree, and I don't think we should agree with everybody, but we have to find ways to step forward, find something that we can coalesce around. The Ohio School Boards Association stands ready to help with that. As I did say, we have a lobbyist team that's trying to keep legislation as favorable as possible. We have diversity and equity. We've kind of doubled down on that. And we have had people most unhappy with that. And we stand behind that. So we are there to help you find the resources you need for that, as well as policy work. We work with superintendents, treasurers, and board members every day. So as you find yourself in some of these conversations, it all comes back to policy again. And so we're there to help you with that as well. And I think those are the two biggest issues, so that I'm not redundant. I can pass this back.
Again, thank you, Dr. Kim Miller-Smith. At this time, we have Dr. Scott Hunt, ODE Director of Field Relationships.
Check. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be on the panel this evening. Usually when I'm out, I make sure that I say thank you. I'm a former superintendent, 6 years in a small rural district in Geauga County, was a director of college and career readiness, building principal, counselor, teacher. So I know the work that you do and your leadership is incredibly important, especially now that maybe it looks like we're coming out of a pandemic into a school year that might look somewhat normal, whatever that means. But I just want to share some thoughts with you. I'm sure you've all seen our state strategic plan. We have 3 core principles there, but I want to focus on one thing that I think might be important as a superintendent or a district leader, and that is about partnership. And I say that because part of my role at the department as the executive director of field relations is really to be the liaison between the department and the field to make sure that we are providing you with the necessary support and resources that you need to do the things that you do. And I think over the course of the pandemic, at least from my seat, I think we've done a much better job at trying to make those connections with you when we're creating the things that you need. So it's critically important. But the partnerships I think you really need to focus on are really around that kind of that triangle, right? The strongest geometric shape, which is you, your leadership team, and your staff, our parents, guardians, and our caregivers, and our students. That's so critically important. Our kids now, what they need, I think, from our districts and from the state, quite frankly, is our kids need a champion. Our kids need someone to stand up for them and to stand for them, whatever it is that you stand for. And so the partnership piece to me is incredibly important. One of the things that we've been able to do over the course of the last 2 years in terms of support and resources is to provide you, and the field has asked, what is it we can do this year? Do I have to have a remote learning plan? Do I have to close my school? Can I use a calamity day? How do I navigate this? And so part of the work that we're doing out of my office is really kind of focused on what we're going to call heading into next year, the educational flexibilities. And we'll probably put that out within the next week or so. But I wanted to focus on, just to share that with you and then focus on one piece of this, because I also believe that we're in a time of great change, and change is needed in terms of how we're meeting the needs of our diverse learners. So rolling into next year, as you move back to whatever normal looks like for you, you're still going to be able to provide students their personalized learning through maybe a blended learning declaration. You can also take advantage of credit flexibility, which I know many districts have done this year and last year. You can also set up an online learning school if you wish. There are some rules and regulations and code around that. But the last piece we're going to put on this list of flexibilities is competency-based learning models. I'm sure we are all aware of what that is. But when I think through that, what that means in terms of flexibility and how we support that is, this is where time now becomes the variable and is not the constant. And again, I think it's difficult to meet the diverse learning needs of our students when we have everything boxed into a day. Competency-based learning models will allow you to maybe get outside of the box, to use time as the variable and to really determine what it is students need so that you can deliver in whatever way you're delivering their educational programming. And then one thing that we are doing as well and I've heard a lot of great stories here this evening, is we are embarking on a journey at the department out of my office in collecting your stories. And it's important that we hear the stories because not everyone is hearing your story. So we are looking to, and this is your invitation to get in touch with me and share your story with me. We're going to memorialize those stories. We want to post those stories and we want to share them, not because we just want to collect and share, but there might be a good story that your district could tap into, and you can make that connection, potentially build a partnership with someone, in your area. So partnerships, flexibilities, and making sure you're focused on the right things in your district. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Dr. Hunt. At this time, we have Ms. Merle Johnson, OABSE Superintendent Committee member.
Thank you, and member of the State Board of Education. I'm so proud of that. Anyway, it's very nice to be here. I appreciate the invitation. The question dealt with priorities for superintendents. And so I want to begin by lifting the voice of our National Teacher of the Year, Kurt Russell. And he said something that's very important to me. He said, quote, "I am truly blessed to be a part of a profession that transforms and legitimizes student voices and plants the groundwork for a more culturally responsive education." And then on Wednesday, I attended a meeting of ODE's Whole Child Framework. I'm so honored to be one of the 2 board members representing on that task force. And we heard from 2 students who represented the Ohio Association of Student Leaders. And they said, one of the things they said, what they would like for us to do is to provide opportunities for students to communicate and advocate for themselves. So when you talk about the Whole Child Framework, we're talking about students who are safe, healthy, engaged, supported, and challenged. And what better way to help students feel safe and challenged is to help them empower them to advocate for themselves. So because of that, when the horrible bills that my soror mentioned, House Bill 322 and 327 hit the scene, I thought it was important for us to have a student voice because these bills, which would cause teachers to lose their license if they teach the truth about American history, they're going to directly impact our students. And what better way than to get students to advocate for themselves than to give them an opportunity to fight against bills that would harm not only their present, but their future. And so I reached out. I retired in 2012 after 40 years teaching in Cleveland, so I didn't have any more students. So I reached out to my friends and said, I need some students. And I was able to get 13 students from a number of my educator friends who said, here's some students who would be passionate about these bills. And thank goodness for Zoom. I took those 13 students, we had Zoom meetings. First thing I told them was, you've got to familiarize yourself with the bills. So I gave them legislature.ohio.gov. They went off and read the bills. The next meeting, they came back, talked about how they felt about the bills. And I said, not only do you need to speak at your school boards, but I need you to write. I was an English teacher, so what else would I say? And so out of 13, I got 10 of them to write letters to the editor. And I need to tell you, here's how diverse the group was. I had students from Rocky River, Beechwood, Shaker Heights, Cleveland, and Westlake. And so all those students cared very passionately. They wrote letters. I was able to get their 10 letters published in 2 community newspapers in Cleveland and 1 community newspaper in Akron. And the community members in the Huff area of Cleveland, they loved hearing from students so much that they asked the editor for more. And so I was able to get 2 of the students hired to write letters every month, to write articles every month, and they get $50 for each article that they write. One of the students spoke at his school board meeting in Westlake. I drove to Westlake to support him, and I videotaped his presentation. And I know his mom, and I put his presentation on Facebook. And his mom shared with me that when he was born, he had a genetic disorder that didn't allow him to talk until he was 5 years old. And she told me that when she saw the presentation, the video on Facebook, she cried because she did not know that he could do that. The students were also able to idea stream, interview them, and they just were all over the place. My point is the priority, we've got to get students involved in these kinds of issues, not just on a superintendent's advisory board, but also in their classroom and encourage the teachers to get students involved. I wanna share one sentence from each of the 10 letters. It won't take me long, but I just want you to hear their thoughts because we need to put the student voice in this issue. So Kayla Blake from Cleveland School of Science and Medicine, she said, as a Black student in America, it is already hard enough to have my identity recognized and my history acknowledged, especially in the classroom. But these two bills would only make everything worse. And Avery from Westlake said, it is important for K-12 students and teachers to talk about racism and sexism, both social and systemic constructs that exist today, and create an environment where kids can grow up to be accepting and understanding people. Greg from Rocky River said, CRT is not a subject taught in high school. In fact, it is found primarily in college level law courses to teach future lawyers and defenders of justice the history of laws and regulations that were created to hinder the rights and freedom of minorities. That's the definition of CRT. That's a high school student. He knows that. Okay. So it's really important for us to know these things. Um, Carly, who is now a student at Harvard, she's a Shaker Heights graduate, she said House Bills 322 and 327 encourage narrow, singular viewpoints that perpetuate racist, discriminatory, and exclusionary abuse, trauma, behavior, and narratives in the classroom, while also discouraging the student voices and advocacy that is central to Shaker's student organizations. Lily, who is now a student at University of Rochester, but she graduated from Beechwood, she said, I urge our legislators to vote no on House Bill 322 and House Bill 327, which are dangerous for the future of our state. I'm almost done. And Jacob Rentamaki, he's a student that spoke in Westlake, whose mom cried. He said, the goal of these bills is to control our voices still by learning, organizing, and speaking out against these bills. And then he said, check out Honesty for Ohio Education. You, the reader, can help to protect our educational system. And La Erica, Cleveland student, said, you may say, I'm not racist, I don't see color, but that belittles the justice that people of color have been fighting for 400 plus years. Colorblindness is a systematic excuse to justify conversations people aren't ready to have. I love that sentence. Um, and Owen's the student who spoke at his Rocky River uh, school board meeting. You might have seen the headlines where the parents were really um, creating a little chaos in Rocky River, and he was courageous enough to speak at his school board meeting. Owen said, if these bills were to pass, this would create a generation of students who would be unable to think critically about themselves, the past, or the world they currently live in. This would be detrimental to the development of our democratic society. And the last two, Jeremiah from Cleveland said, to share my viewpoint, I have joined Speak. And the students named their own group. They named it Speak, and Jeremiah mentioned it. That stands for Students Promoting Equity and Knowledge. And then Jeremiah goes on to say, a student-led group um, bent on educating people to take a stance against discrimination, racism, and censorship. And the last one I'm going to share with you is Elliot, and she attends Bates College right now. She graduated from Shaker Heights. She said, I am fighting for curriculum and content that courageously embraces exploration of how power is manifested, maintained, and undermined. I urge folks to leverage their leadership, join coalitions, and engage in action to combat the passage of 322 and 327. That's what can happen when folks just sent me some students and we were able to organize and advocate for democracy. I'm wearing a shirt that says read banned books. I also formed the Speak Banned Books Freedom Club. Freedom was spelled Freadom, and they chose to read some banned books. We had wonderful discussions. But when you talk about students feeling safe, we need to empower them to deal with things that they do have some control over. They didn't have control over COVID, but they do have control over whether they advocate for their education or not. So with that, I'm just going to encourage you to please involve student voices in what's going on.
Excellent, thank you. And now we have Mrs. Charlotte McGuire, President, State Board of Education, also from District 3.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited about being here. This is part of my goal as your new board president. I want to build strong partnerships. The only way this state can advance is if we're on the same page. I want to thank all of you for what you do. It's not easy. We've had many challenges, but guess what? There was many opportunities. Opportunities to distinguish yourself from the rest. I challenge you to be you best. There are no two districts alike, no two children alike, no two schools alike. What you have to do is do what's best for your territory. And one of the things I say this even to my grandson, you be you best, distinguish yourself from the rest. And my true north is a quote, and I should have prefaced my comments, was from Frederick Douglass. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And what you do determines how we fulfill our adopted strategic plan from 2018. Each child, our future. There is no reason the state of Ohio cannot be distinguished among states of the nation. But it's what we do together. And together, Dr. Hunt gave me my assignment. He talked about partnerships. But one of the priorities you have to have is quality schools. And I want to tell a little story about my niece that just moved here from Mississippi. She's now part of the Miamisburg School District. And I said, which school district do you like the best? Now, coming from deep south, I thought she would say Mississippi. She said Miamisburg. And so I said, well, why? She said, the teachers. And so, you know, given the culture, I thought she would play the race card. She said, no, Auntie, I have one black teacher and all white teachers in Mississippi, and I have one black teacher and all white teachers in Miamisburg. I said, so what is it? And this is something I've always said in every 44 districts I have visited in District 3. She said, my teachers showed they cared about me. They affirmed me. They made sure I had everything I needed to be successful. It's all about relationships. One of the priorities when you think about of the strategic plan is, first one is equity, the second one is partnership, the third one is quality schools, excelling schools. And I believe we want to return the joy of teaching with the joy of learning, because when those two sparks meet, you release the potential, the aspiration, the goals of every unique child. While I am not a formal educator, I am a municipal government and nonprofit executive, but I have been involved in nationwide reforms that where education was a partner, whether it's juvenile justice to close the school to prison pipeline, or with Manpower Research out of Chicago, working in public housing, trying to, I think someone addressed it. Our children can't dream if they don't know the dreams are out there. they're environmentally deprived. So you have to give them the exposure. You have to give them the opportunities to know there's something beyond the backyard. So what I challenge you to do from quality standpoint, we will be visiting, hopefully, all of your districts, all of your territories. We need to get on one page. I always say this, and people have heard me say, from the governor's house to the White House. No, from the White House to the outhouse. We need to get on one accord. We need to be sure that we know what excelling quality schools are. Quality schools are the essence of who you are, what you offer, and what you produce. It's the same as my favorite restaurant. If the quality goes down, guess what? Charlotte will not be there spending her money. And so even I tell my districts, you should be the schools of choice because you craft the environment, you craft the teachers. You know, I've gone to districts where I'm drawn into the school, but I've gone to some districts and I'm keeping it real. Everybody know me, I keep it real. It's just like walking into a prison. I see people shaking, you know what I'm talking about. So quality, your priority has to be quality. You're talking about policies. We are about to plan for the priorities for the next biennium budget. I would love to hear what your priorities are. So that can be factored in the budget requests to the governor and the legislature. We don't want to react to policy. We need to be proactive, which means we need to be ahead of the game. We should set the table for policy making because policies determine how we operate. Since I've been on the board, we have been reacting and spending too much time on pushback on adopted policies. If anything, we should inform the policy-making process because guess who knows what's best for children? Those that deal with them every day. So it's all about relationship quality schools. Be you best, distinguish yourself from the rest. And guess what? Mr. Hunt talked about it. Dr. Hunt talked about it. Relationship. I don't care what you say, relationship with the parents will matter. And how you set up that relationship relates to quality, which is a priority. So each child, our future, we want out of all of your district that each child is challenged, prepared, and empowered to succeed with, I always say this, with the post-secondary choice of theirs, and that they will be lifelong learners, making a positive contribution to our society. We do not have to settle people. And think about this. The students that come out of your district are a reflection of you, a reflection of your quality, reflection of whether I choose to have my child there. You know, I'm just keeping it real. And the reason I say that, I grew up in segregation. Jim Crow laws, the law was against me. But guess what? I had affirming teachers that say you could be anything you wanted to be with that, regardless of the color of your skin. I had teachers that told me education was the key to not only my success, but my freedom. And I am a proud graduate of the Booker T. Washington High School, segregated high school in Memphis, Tennessee. I came to Ohio to go to college. My background is business administration with a concentration in accounting. But guess what? I'm very people focused. I'm on the board to be a voice, not only for the children's success, but for your success. I tell my district leaders, when I got on the board, one thing I kept hearing, get out of the box. Guess what I tell my district leaders? Get rid of the box. Reinvent it. You know, before reimagined education became popular, I knew we had to change courses. I say it's almost like turning around the Titanic. You see the glacier ahead, and we got to make some changes. And you are the key to that. And remember this, no two districts are alike. but you can be the best you can be. And I'm gonna end on, keep it real. Relationships elevating academic learning. REAL, keep it real.
Again, thank you, Mrs. McGuire. And now we have Mr. Ron Todd, a minority rep from the Governor DeWine's office.
Thank you so much. I want to first give honor and thanks to the President Maceo for inviting me, and Superintendent Overson and all the esteemed panel and all you fine educators out there and leaders. I got a quote here, and I got it from my mentors, Dr. Jack Jackson. Each of you are overseeing and guiding the seed corn of our future, which is our youth. I come here from the governor's office, Governor Mike DeWine, Lieutenant Governor John Houston, to encourage you this morning, this evening. Dog, I've been traveling too much. Where am I at? Columbus, okay. To be here. I got a couple things here too that I know that will help you. And we talk about relationships. Relationships move at the speed of trust, but social moves move at the speed of relationships. Think about that. I got a book for you guys to read. I know you guys are all educators. The Speed of Trust, The One Thing That Changes Everything by Stephen Covey. The Speed of Trust, The One Thing That Changes Everything, Stephen Covey. If you haven't read it, please read that. There's a quote that was in this book. I got this book last week, guys. I saw one of the pastors in Lima told me about the book. The quote is by Alvin Tovaler, who was an author, journalist, and educator. He said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will be not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Wow. That's a whole dynamic for me in Dayton, Ohio, graduate from Dayton Belmont in 1985. I didn't know that existed, who was a product of busing. Governor DeWine or Lieutenant Governor could not be here tonight. But as I looked and seen the things that we have talked about, I'm looking at in January the 14th in 2019, Governor DeWine said a couple of things in this speech. He said, "I'm the governor for every constituent in the state of Ohio. Everybody in the state of Ohio needs a chance. Everybody. So we got to break all barriers down." And then in March the 9th, 2019, Governor DeWine said in the State of the State address, "We're going to direct significant state resources to Ohio's most in-need children to help them overcome the barriers and disadvantages of the poverty and trauma." That was 2019, March the 3rd. March the 3rd, 2020, COVID kind of happened. Everything changed. But the key is, though, as Madam President said about the relationships, I, Ronald C. Todd Tech, and as a Minority Affairs Liaison, I'm going to make sure each of you have my business card. I work with all folks. I work with our policy advisor who strictly does education. And you might know Devin, if you haven't met him yet, that's fine. But I'm able to, let's get in front. I'm sorry, a lot of times we hustle backwards. Stuff is done, and then we're going to complain about it. Well, let's get in the room beforehand and discuss it. And that's why I'm here. I'm the connector. I'm the bridge. If you can tell, I play offensive line at Bowling Green State University in the mid-'80s, so I blocked for you to get you in. My job is to bring smart people and smart people together and get out the way. I'm not dumb, but I'm smart too, but I know what I know. And I come here today to encourage you for that. You're not by yourself. The Governor, DeWine, and Lieutenant Governor wants to hear your voice heard. We can't get caught up about who we don't like or what all this stuff is, but I got to hear it. But I hear it, I can take it to them, but then I'll get you in the room to say what you say in better words than I would say it. Each of you are so important for this state. Intel, I've been to meetings with Intel, like, where are they educated? Where this at? Well, it's gonna come from you all, not from us. But there's so many opportunities out here. Ohio is building up. Ohio is gonna be a tech world, just like Silicon pretty soon. Folks are looking in. I'm with Jobs Ohio all the time. And companies are looking to see where they're gonna go. The first thing to look at is a school district. First thing to look at is school district. Now, I told them in the meeting, now don't get mad at me. Some of my folks from urban school districts need some help. Don't get it twisted. But it's not also throwing money too, because money only does one thing. It just helps a little bit. You know, I'm a former NFL agent. I've seen more guys who, for 16 years, and I'm usually watching a draft now, but I'll watch it for fun. I don't care what's going on in the draft now. But the thing is, though, I'm seeing more people who didn't have money, who get money, who are broke now. We got to change the mindset that you can get it. But we need each and every one of you from your leadership position to do that. The governor wants to come alongside of you. I know there's some legislation you don't like. I understand that. Doc here is having folks writing letters. That is good. But you got to push the legislators. You got to push everybody, even legislators that you might not like. The ones you don't like, too. Send them letters, too, to make and set meetings up with them. Because they get voted on, too, y'all. But you got to be, in football, we talked about being intentional and strategic. You have to be. But how you do that? You come together. Not one school district over here, they getting everything. What about someone else? But when you come collectively, it's good. That's why this group here is so important, to have that. And Superintendent Overson told about this group. I said, look, man, have you guys met? No. Okay, fine. Let's get some meetings set up so we hear the voice from each and every one of you. I'm a preacher, guys. I go over time yet. I'm sorry. I like to preach, and I used to like to stand up, but I'm trying to be professional here. And anyway, but the thing is this: we're here to help. I didn't come all the way down from Cincinnati to just be here. I'm gonna stay. You got some food, man? Okay, thank you, man. Shit, I'm hungry. I ain't want a band. I want the food. It's Friday night. My wife ain't fixing no food tonight. But anyway, well, praise God for each and every one of you. Don't forget each and every one of you. Your leadership is so important. Thank you. Where the girl took a picture at? The teacher. She took a picture so I can show my mom when I get home. I can put on Facebook with us out here. But thank you. I got a bunch of cards. Just email me. Please text me. I want to talk to each and every one of you. I told the sister, Doc in Trotwood, leave too close to my mama's house. You have to know who you are, okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ty. And now to wrap up this session, you have Dr. Renee Willis.
All right, what a session. So we thank you all. You are the heavy hitters. We're the boots on the ground. We're in the trenches. So this is a double challenge because we heard from each of these organizations what they do and how they support us as superintendents and our students, from mental health to educational flexibilities to policy making to our strategic plan from our state board of education. And the final one, and I'm gonna wait till I get my card because he's gonna give every one of us a card. So this double check, and he's not playing, look at him, right there. Okay, so here's the challenge, the call to action. It's not only to my fellow superintendents, but it's also to you, our state leaders in various organizations. Again, we are OABSE, the Ohio Alliance of Black School Educators, out of the National Alliance, who was formed for the purpose of educating all children, but particularly our African-American children. I will challenge you as our state leaders of major organizations to go back and speak a word about your relationship and partnership with us. Because see, the world that we live in often is not the world by which you sit at a table. So let me be very clear. In this state, there are 9 Black female superintendents. And in this state, there are 15 Black male superintendents, and it's getting ready to be 14. That's 24 superintendents. How many superintendents are in this state? 600, 614. Now, somebody said, what? That must not be educator. 614. That's less than 4%. I would ask you to reflect about the organizations you represent and what does your leadership look like? It might be representative of the 4%. So here's the double challenge. Go back, Freudian slip, and be introspective with your organizations about the partnership and the reaching out to us as a representation of minority students. But the us, because we are overwhelmed. We are inundated with doing the good work, but I challenge us to be able to walk, chew gum, and juggle elephants in order to make the partnerships work. So when they reach out to us, when Mr. Todd calls me from the governor's office, I'm not going to say no. Or if I can't, I am definitely going to delegate. I'm going to delegate responsibly because we've got to be in partnership with the people that make things happen. So that's the double challenge call to action for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Willis, on the wrap up there. Kind of share with you what the rest of the evening looks like. There's food, some finger foods out here, because I know many of you haven't eaten your dinner yet, so some finger foods you can have. There's also going to be some beverages out there as well. Behind the storage doors will open up here shortly, and there's a jazz band that's going to play live jazz tonight for us here. And also from 7:10 to 8 o'clock, well, 7:10 about 7:45, we have some sponsors. And again, one of the things we want to be very mindful, we're a small organization trying to grow. And we have sponsors who kind of helped fund a lot of the things that we're able to do now. So we're going to let them have their voice and share some insights about their programs, maybe 2 to 3 minutes per program that's here, just making sure they get their voice on the table. I know many of the sponsors, many of you know them, already know the sponsors anyway, but it's just an opportunity for them to be able to share and say thank you for them donating and contributing to our organization. So again, we have some live jazz that are starting in about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. There's food. Let me ask the president. President, where's the food at? Right behind the door. So somebody's open the door then. So the food, the jazz is right behind here. We'll open the door here in a second. Any final parting words from you, President?
Many thanks. Sorry, I've been preoccupied with a few other things, but many thanks to all of you for coming out and sharing your thoughts, your ideas, being here in support of what it is we're trying to do, and that is make education better for our children, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. So what we intend to do is to continue to reach out to you, to strengthen our relationship, to strengthen our partnership, to be engaged in the active work of influencing policy and decision-making. That's what we're committed to doing. And so again, thank you. Now, we don't want you running out of here because we're going to open this to petition. We're going to have our reception. We're going to provide some finger food items and some wine and beer and sodas. And we want you to hang around, especially because this is also a big opportunity for our sponsors. They're going to be coming in, and we're going to give them an opportunity as you network and mingle with your colleagues, give them an opportunity and some time to talk about the products and services that they have that can help bring solutions to the problems that we all face, right? So don't go anywhere. Stick with us for the next hour or so as we just, say hello. I mean, we haven't seen each other for a long time, right? So no need to be in a hurry. It's good to see faces, right? So hang around, and we'll move this wall out shortly here. We also have a live trio jazz band with female vocalists, so that's going to be a treat. So thank you all again for coming out, and we're looking forward to working with you throughout the year and future years to come. Anything else, Ty? Great, let's get it over.
Madam President, how are you?
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I plan to come to your celebration
Oh, I hope you can. I hope you can.